Alright, so we chose stick welding for our safety presentation. So I'll start by covering PPE. So for when stick welding, you need a welding helmet, some gloves, protect you from the heat, safety or welding jacket for not to burn your skin or anything when you're welding, and then probably want jeans and boots when you're welding, so that way you don't burn through your shoes or your pants. And then that's about it for PPE. And next is the work environment, things you should consider. And some of those things you should consider are like fuel, things that are very flammable around you. Look around your work environment and make sure you're clear of all this, especially fuel from the vapors, easily flammable. And probably watch for people around you so you don't flash a bunch of people or anything like that to keep you from hurting anyone else. Also, any tripping hazards are things you want to watch out for, so keep your area and your floors clean so you're not tripping or anything, or no one's tripping. So, and that's about it for that. Alright, so now we're moving on to equipment setup, and this is things you should do before you start welding. And so you start by finding yourself your piece of metal that you want to weld on, or whatever you're welding on. And so usually you want a clean surface on it to weld on. Makes it easier for welding. And you can use a grinder and either wire wheel or hard disk. There's also a soft disk. And that's what you use to clean it up. And then once your piece is clean, you can start by setting up your welder, which that would be hooking up your thing to your piece of metal. So then it'll be all ready. And then we also have this here because we're welding on a wooden table, so this will protect the table from catching on fire, which would not be a very good idea to weld on a wooden table. So we're going to use 5/32 sticks, and they're rated for 130 to 200 amps, and they're what we're going to be using. So I have the stick welder set to 150 amps, and that's what we're going to use because that's what works best with this welder and those rods. And next, you probably plug it in. You want to plug it in, so I'm going to plug it in. Alright, so if you want, you can clamp down your piece that you're welding on if need be, which I probably won't because it's not going anywhere. It's pretty stable. And so get out one of these rods. So these are the rods we'll be using. And we'll obviously in a second I'm going to put on all my equipment and then we'll show a slight demonstration, but for the time being this is mostly how you set it up to have everything ready. Make sure obviously everything's clear, you have a nice work surface. And then this, you put the stick in there, in the stinger, and that's all set up. Now, obviously, if it's touching your piece when you turn the welder on, it's going to start welding, so you have to be careful of that. And that's about it for setup. So, yeah. Alright, so we've got it all set up here. Got my equipment on, ready to weld. So there's a first I thought I'd cover by there's a few things people say before welding. There's like I don't know all of them, but there's a few like cover, welding. There's a few others, but it's just to let other people's around you know that you're gonna start welding. And also, I forgot to cover. This is the only hammer I could find, but you can use a hammer to knock off the slag from stick welding. So to get started welding, turn the welder on, and so I'm gonna lay a bead. And obviously, like I said, you probably want to say, well, if you're in a shop with someone else, say welding just to give them a heads up. So, alright, I'm gonna lay a bead. I melted through there. It's a little bit thinner steel, so I'm gonna turn it down a bit. Turn it down to 120 because it's a little bit thinner steel. That was my bad. But that's also another thing that I should have covered is that you have to watch your temperature so you don't melt through the steel, which this was a good example because I was way too hot, so I melted through. So you can bridge that or whatever if you're welding on something. But I'm going to try to lay another bead for you. Looks like we're still a little too hot for this thin piece of metal. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Now sometimes you'll have trial and error like this, but it's a good example, so. And this is another, I guess, good example, is if you get stuck like this, is that you can either snap it off really quick or take off your stinger, so that way it doesn't melt the rod, which it will in some scenarios. Then you can just snap it right off. So it's another thing you have to watch out for. And then you can just put it back in and go on about your day. This is another reason why you should probably clamp down your piece is when stick welding. If you have to snap it off, you can it'll be held into place pretty good. So. I'm gonna grab a new rod. Clamp it down. Okay, another thing to cover is that you need to watch on your the space between your end of your rod and your piece, so you can keep a good connection. Now, these might not be all. I think these are some mismatched rods, I do believe, because some of them are thicker than others. So these are not all the same ones that are in that container. So I guess if you have the right rods, it's a lot easier to guesstimate what you're doing. So. You also want to choose a pattern you would go with. You can go like eights, you can go U's, you can do circles. I prefer to do circles, but it's up to you. That works for any welding, so. Alright. So, we'll let these cool for a second, and then we'll knock off some of the slag. But, another thing which you want to watch is like that is your temperature when you're doing it, and then sometimes you have to watch for your speed, how fast you're moving, and how fast you have to keep moving the rod down as you go and doing your circles, and watch your distance between it. And then when you're starting, the way you strike is you kind of want to, almost like a match, kind of. I mean, there's a few different ways to do it, but I like to do like a match and kind of get it started. And then there is a few other ways, like I said, to do it. And then another thing you want to watch out for when you're knocking the slag off is to watch for hot slag flying and hitting you. Sometimes you can use a chisel too. Now you have to watch because some of these are pretty hot too. So, I mean, they're alright, not too bad. I mean, it's been a while since I've welded, so can't, like I said, it's been a while, so ain't the best. It's been a while, so. And I think that's about all for how to weld, and everything you should watch out for while welding. And I think that's about it for this.